I sat silently at the far end of the dinner table, next to a tray of untouched pumpkin pie. Across from me, my father's face was flushed red. He had just finished his third glass of wine, his shirt collar askew like the rest of his half-hearted attempt at preparing for Thanksgiving. In that brief moment of stillness, when the sound of silverware faded, he spoke with a hoarse, shaky voice. "I'm in debt to some really unpleasant people." The kitchen froze. My mom slammed her mashed potato spoon down on the table, making a sharp, dry sound. My brother Nick raised his eyebrows, then immediately glanced at me. And unspoken cue we've rehearsed for years. My turn to fix everything. I sat there, chest tightening. The only sound left was the relentless ticking of the wall clock, pounding in my skull. "I thought you promised no more gambling," I said, trying to keep my voice even, though my insides were burning. Dad didn't look at me. He stared into his empty glass, slowly twisting it in his hands. "I need about 14,000. By Monday." Mom jumped in smoothly, her voice sweet as syrup but no less staged. "Harper, you're not married, you don't have kids, and you live alone. You don't really have any big expenses, right?" I looked up at her and gave a tight smile. That "no husband, no kids" line was her favorite double-edged sword. Half pity, half a push to cast me as the family's bottomless wallet. "You mean, because I didn't get married, I should be the one paying off Dad's debts? We just thought you're a little more comfortable than the rest of us," Nick chimed in, spinning his beer can like it was some casual conversation. "I mean, that apartment you're renting, it's not exactly luxury." I clenched my teeth, forcing down the lump of fury in my throat. They had just insulted my one-bedroom apartment, then turned around and asked me for an amount that could have covered a full year of rent. "That car of yours must be worth something," Mom added, like she'd found the answer to a riddle. "That hybrid SUV, you could sell it and probably have just enough, huh?" I set down my fork and knife, every movement slow and deliberate. I bought that car after 8 years of working non-stop. Paid for every dollar myself. I save every month just to keep up. And that money Dad needs? It's to pay off loan sharks. "You make it sound like we've never sacrificed anything for you," Dad snapped, lifting his eyes to meet mine for the first time. Bloodshot, furious, and shameless, all at once. I laughed, not out of humor but because I couldn't stomach the script anymore. "Sacrificed? You mean when you burned through my college fund at Atlantic City? Or that time Mom told me to understand the adults when I asked why there was no tuition money left? Yet we still managed that family vacation in Florida?" Nick cleared his throat. Mom flushed. The table fell silent. I stood, grabbed my coat. "I'm not selling my car. I'm not wiring money. I'm not putting anything on the line for this family again. If you walk out that door," Dad hissed, "don't expect to come back." I turned, standing tall in the thick, suffocating air. Good, because from now on I won't. As the door shut behind me, night had fully fallen. I didn't cry. What I felt, maybe for the first time in years, wasn't guilt for not being the good daughter. It was relief. A quiet, terrifying kind of lightness. I drove through the night, my chest still aching in waves from what had just unfolded at Thanksgiving dinner. But instead of heading straight home, I turned west, down the winding road of Maple Court, leading to an old 2-story wooden house at the very end. The porch light was still on. The front roof remained half repaired after the summer storm, and the lawn had once again been lazily mowed. My family lived there, in the house they still believed was some miracle gift from a generous, anonymous landlord. Only I knew the name on the deed wasn't Brady Management LLC like they'd thought. It was Harper Ellen Harris. Me. The same woman they laughed at hours ago for living in a shoebox with leaky plumbing. I turned off the engine and sat in the darkness for a while, watching as the kitchen lights glowed from inside. It had been 3 years since I used my entire inheritance from my grandmother. Nearly $190,000 to cover most of the purchase price of that house. I still remembered the day I signed the paperwork, hands shaking so badly the notary handed me a bottle of water. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I gave my parents and younger brother a stable roof over their heads, they'd finally see me differently. Not as the quiet shadow always seated on the outskirts of the family table. I was wrong. I never set conditions, never asked them to pay a dime. I just sent them annual tax notices under the company name. Nicely printed, like a proper property management firm. They never questioned it. They simply assumed they deserved to be taken care of. No strings attached. When I chose to live downtown, in a small studio apartment on the 3rd floor of an old building on Lafayette Street, they laughed out loud. On the rare occasion they visited, rare as a meteor shower, my mother would whisper to the neighbors or building staff that I was still not settled, and that Harper is the kind of woman who doesn't even need a living room. Once, I overheard my brother Mason tell his girlfriend, "My sister lives like some elderly hermit in the middle of New York." The irony? I quietly paid $680 a month in property tax for the very house he was living in. I remembered last winter like it was yesterday. They called me at midnight, said the roof was leaking badly. Dad had a cough that wouldn't go away, and Mom was worried about mold. No one asked where I'd get the money. I sent a roofing company first thing in the morning. The invoice was $6,400, pulled straight from the savings account I had set aside for my first vacation in 6 years. Last month, Mason texted me asking to borrow $300 for gas and some toys for his little girl. I wired it without hesitation. Later, I saw his Instagram story at a Lakers-Knicks game, courtside, VIP seats. I'm no saint, but I'm not stupid either. After leaving Thanksgiving dinner, I didn't go home. I drove to Sarah Green's office, my old college friend, now a real estate attorney with her own firm. She was the one who helped me form the LLC, transfer full ownership of the house under the company name, and keep my identity off every public record. "Harper," Sarah looked up from her files, surprised to see me at the glass door just before 10 p.m. "I have a question," I said plainly. "If a landlord hasn't received rent for 3 years, but has covered all expenses, do they have the right to evict the tenants?" She studied me for a moment, then waved me inside. "Are you ready to tell them?" I nodded. It felt like arming a bomb. "Harper, if you're truly ready to end this game, we can start the process. But once we do, there's no undoing it." I pulled a bundle of papers from my bag. Roofing invoices, plumber receipts, last year's property assessment report. I don't want to go back anymore. I want them to know exactly who their generous landlord really is. Sarah's face grew more serious. "Then welcome to the real fight. And trust me, sometimes family makes the worst tenants." I didn't say anything else, just nodded. After years of silent sacrifice, they were about to learn a truth they never saw coming. That house was never a blessing. It was a test. And they failed, miserably. 3 days after Thanksgiving dinner, I was working from my favorite little cafe on Spring Street. The kind of cozy spot with soft lighting and the smell of cinnamon waffles that made me feel like I belonged, even when the world outside didn't. It was where I came to focus, away from the sound of leaky pipes in my studio apartment. I had just hit send on my year-end campaign report when the door chime jingled. I looked up from my screen and froze. My mother and brother, Mason, were walking toward me, faces full of exaggerated drama, like they'd rehearsed this scene on the way over. Before I could react, they were already seated. Mom dropped her oversized purse on the table with a thud, her eyes scanning the room before locking on my latte, as if silently judging its luxury. "We need to talk," she said, her voice so low and somber I half expected her to announce someone had died. I shut my laptop. "If this is about Dad's debt, I've already made myself clear. We're not trying to pressure you," Mason jumped in. "We just hoped you could look at this from a family perspective. It's not just a personal issue anymore." I tilted my head. What do you mean? Mom's sister, Aunt Karen, said if we don't pay up soon, those loan guys might escalate. They've started calling the house. Said they'll show up if we don't handle it fast. Mom gently patted my hand, like she was auditioning for a primetime soap opera. Sweetheart, don't let something this small tear the whole family apart. If we have to, I'll pay you back. Every penny, just… For now, maybe you could… Sell the car, Mason said bluntly. That SUV of yours has to be worth at least 20 grand. Sell it and take the train like everyone else. I stared at the two people across from me. My blood. The ones who used to say they loved me. Because you're our daughter. No one asked if I was still paying off student loans. No one cared that I've lived in a cramped studio for over a decade despite working full-time. No one remembered I've always been the one bringing the most gifts during the holidays, paying the water bill when they accidentally forgot, or wiring Mason money for his car inspection, only to see him post stories from a Utah getaway a week later. No, I said. Simply. Mom blinked. What? I'm not selling my car, and I'm not paying a single dollar more. Mason chuckled like I had just told a joke. You serious right now? I stood, grabbing my bag. I've been serious for years. I'm just done being the backup plan for everyone else's bad decisions. Need money? Sell Dad's boat. Sell that fishing gear collection he brags about being worth a Maui vacation. But stop looking at me. Mom called out as I turned to leave. If you walk out of here, don't expect me to treat you like my daughter anymore. I didn't look back. Great. Now you've got another reason to lie to the neighbors. That night, I locked my apartment door tight and called Sarah Green. You still sure about this? She asked, after I laid everything out. I've never been clearer, I replied. It's time they know who their kind landlord has really been for the past 3 years. Sarah sighed. Then tomorrow I'll send over the full documentation. If we're moving forward with the recovery process, we'll have all the legal grounds in place. It's not just paperwork, I said. I'll need proof of non-payment, property damage, anything that makes it indisputable. I can help inspect the house, get photos, and write a formal report, she said. If they push back, they won't have a leg to stand on. I felt a strange lightness in my chest, not quite relief. More like the steady clarity that comes when you stop waiting for someone to change. I had given them enough chances. This time, I wasn't going to talk. I was going to act. Monday morning, just as I stepped into the office, the receptionist waved me over with a hesitant look. There are 2 women waiting in the lounge, she whispered. They said they're your mother and your sister. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. This building was supposed to be my safe space, free from nagging voices, from the pressure to help out, and from whispers about the tiny apartment I lived in. I walked toward the lounge, and just as I expected, Mom sat upright in a pale blue blazer, while my sister Chloe had one leg crossed over the other, absent-mindedly twirling a wave of blonde hair around her finger. They both turned the moment they heard my heels on the wooden floor. We need to talk, Mom began, her voice low but firm. This is my workplace, I said, not a family conference room. Well, you won't answer your phone, Chloe shrugged. We had no choice but to come here. We? I laughed. Or is this just another installment of the tragic family show you kicked off over the weekend? Mom stood up and stepped closer. Your father's situation? It's serious, Harper. They showed up at the house. The neighbors are starting to talk. Oh, so now you're concerned? I tilted my head. Or is it just about saving face? Her expression faltered, but she tried to sound gentle. Sweetheart, no matter what, we're still family. Families get through hard times together. Family? I scoffed. Was it family when I worked 3 jobs to pay off my tuition because Dad gambled away my college fund? When I pulled $2,300, 0 cents out of my savings to fix a burst pipe and didn't even get a thank you? Or when Chloe borrowed Grandma's necklace for prom and sold it on eBay to buy a flight to Palm Springs? Who kept quiet about that? Chloe flushed red. You can't keep dragging up the past. Past? I stepped closer, my tone no longer polite. Those past debts still show up on my bank statements. So why are you here now? To pressure me? To guilt me into selling my car? Or is there a new sob story waiting? We're being threatened, Harper, Mom said, no longer pretending to be sweet. Your father slipped up, and now we're all paying the price. You can't just stand by. I took a deep breath. Enough. All right, I said, pulling out my phone. If you really need help, then you deserve to know the truth. I opened the folder labeled Brady Holdings and handed it to my mom. Screenshots of the deed, tax statements, and repair invoices, all under my name through a registered LLC. The house you've been living in? It's not owned by some kind mystery landlord. It's mine. I bought it with every cent of the inheritance Grandma left me. She snatched the phone, eyes scanning the documents. This is fake. It has to be fake. The originals are at the law office, I said calmly. Sarah Green. You remember her? My college friend. She invited you to her wedding last year. She handled the purchase and helped keep my name off the records. Chloe shot up, eyes wide. You mean, you've been lying to us for 3 years? No. I stayed quiet. I let you live rent-free, comfortably, while I cut expenses, fixed the roof, replaced pipes, upgraded the heating system. Mom tossed the phone back like it was contaminated. Why would you do this? To humiliate us? To play power games? No, I said softly. I did it because I stupidly thought that if I gave you stability, you'd finally see me as part of the family. No one spoke for a few seconds. Just the hum of the printer and the scrape of a chair in the distance. Chloe exhaled sharply. So what now? You gonna kick us out? I didn't answer right away. I thought about all those nights I sat with a calculator, choosing between groceries and utility bills, while they posted party photos and bought new furniture. That depends, I said. If you want to have an adult conversation, I'm open. But if you're here to blame, manipulate, or make demands, then you'd better expect a letter from my lawyer. I turned and walked back toward my desk, leaving them standing silent in the middle of the office. Because now they knew. That house was never theirs. Not really. Saturday night, the air in New Jersey turned sharply cold. I drove alone to the house at the end of Willow Creek, where, for the past 3 years, my parents and Chloe had comfortably called home, never once asking about a single bill or whose name was actually on the deed. They were spending the weekend at Aunt Carol's, according to a vaguely threatening voicemail my mom left after our confrontation at my office. I figured they were using the time to strategize a comeback. But tonight, I had my own plan, and I came prepared, with a flashlight, a camera, and the property inspection checklist Sarah had sent from her law firm. As I turned the key, the one I'd always kept but never used, it felt like I was walking into the scene of an abandoned crime. The door creaked open and a rush of cigarette smoke and dampness hit me square in the face. I coughed, clicked on the flashlight, and stepped slowly into the living room. The once beige carpet was now a grimy brown, speckled with burn marks, remnants of cigarettes casually flicked and forgotten. On the wall near the window were 2 holes, one round, one rectangular, like someone had punched the drywall and left it that way for months. The mahogany coffee table, the only antique I had kept from Grandma's house, was covered in deep scratches and water rings from hot mugs with no coasters. I lifted my camera. Each shutter click echoed like a sentence passed. In the kitchen, the fridge was leaking, its handle hanging by one screw. Cabinet doors sagged on broken hinges, held up with strips of red duct tape. I opened the microwave. It was coated in a yellowish grease, with a burnt popcorn smell that made me gag. I climbed the stairs, the floorboards groaned under my weight, and I could feel a few spots sink noticeably. In the bathroom, I nearly slipped on pooled water around the base of the toilet. Clearly, a long-standing leak. Thick black mold snaked up the shower wall like vines. A testament to months, maybe years of neglect. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and exhaled. Something inside me cracked. Then I walked into my old bedroom. Now Chloe's makeup room. The door opened to a scene that stopped me cold. At least 10 empty wine bottles littered the tile floor. The vanity was packed with high-end cosmetics, and the walls were plastered with pop star posters and sticker-covered selfies. The small wooden chest I used to store letters and childhood photos was missing its drawers. In the corner, I spotted a familiar red velvet box, the one that once held Grandma's jewelry, carefully kept in my locked apartment drawer. I knelt and opened it with trembling hands. Empty. No necklace, no ring, no earrings engraved with her initials. A wave of cold ran through me. I remembered exactly where I had stored that box. Inside a locked drawer. Once when I came home late from a business trip, the building safety team had broken into my unit after I failed to respond to a fire alarm drill. Maybe that was when they took it. I sat there, stunned. This so-called family hadn't just broken trust. They had stolen something sacred. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. A photo appeared. A pawn shop counter in the next town over. With a sign in the back reading, "Vintage jewelry. We pay more for proven family heirlooms." In the display case, Grandma's platinum teardrop necklace. I sat in the middle of what used to be the safest space of my childhood, feeling as empty as the jewelry box now resting in my lap. They hadn't just wrecked a house. They destroyed memories. I stood up and photographed every corner of the house. The pictures, the notes, the empty box. Everything would be gathered as evidence. Tomorrow, I'd send the full file to Sarah. No more helping out. No more, because we're family. Only what's real. Only what's mine. The next afternoon, I was sitting in Sarah's law office, finalizing the lawsuit paperwork when my phone rang. The screen flashed. Call from Valentina, neighbor. I answered, unsure why she was calling. Harper, her voice was urgent and uncertain. Can you come by for a bit? There's something I think you need to see. 10 minutes later, I was seated in her warm, tidy kitchen. The cozy, cream-colored house just across the street from the one I bought. Valentina, a widow in her 60s, lived alone and had always been polite, even though my family had never treated her kindly. She placed a small black USB drive on the table in front of me. I installed security cameras around my house 5 years ago, she said. Partly because there were a few break-ins around the neighborhood, but mostly because I started seeing things next door that didn't feel right. I looked up at her. I didn't know you were the owner back then. But when you mentioned it the other day in your office, I started going back through the footage. And Harper, I saved nearly everything. She opened her laptop. Frame by frame, the clips played out. My father, Jeff, slamming his hand into the garage door when I refused to co-sign a loan. Chloe sneaking a velvet jewelry box into her car. The very day of that so-called building safety check last year. My mother pointing at me in the front yard, shouting because I didn't come home for family dinner. Scene after scene, yelling, intrusion, humiliation. The footage was silent, but I didn't need sound. Each frame punched the air from my chest. I don't know whether to cry or say thank you, I whispered, eyes still locked on the screen. Valentina reached across the table and held my hand. I didn't interfere before because I thought it was family business. But now I understand. This is emotional abuse. And you don't deserve it. I clutched the USB tightly. I knew this wasn't just a collection of files. This was the key to stripping away the facade they had worked so hard to maintain. 2 days later, I shot up from my chair, when an email from Sarah popped up. Harper's family has filed a countersuit, alleging elder abuse, asset manipulation, and financial fraud. My throat went dry. They really did it. They had tossed gratitude aside and twisted reality into a legal weapon. "We're going to fight this," Sarah said firmly when I arrived at her office later that afternoon. "And I'll make sure they regret underestimating you." We began assembling everything. Payment receipts, bank statements showing I paid the property taxes, repair bills, utility fees. I handed over every screenshot and annotated file plus the videos from Valentina. Sarah queued up one clip for review, a moment caught on camera of my father yelling, "She thinks she owns something? That house is mine no matter what name's on the deed. I raised her. She owes us everything." That sentence, cruel, blunt, but undeniable. "I've submitted an emergency motion," Sarah said. "We'll countersue and present claims of harassment, property damage, and illegal occupancy, and if necessary, we'll press criminal charges for the theft of your grandmother's jewelry." I don't know how long I sat there afterward. My head swirled with 1,000 emotions. Anger, fear, betrayal. But then, something else settled in. Clarity. I wasn't the same Harper they used to walk all over. I looked Sarah in the eye. "Let's do it. No more backing down. Worst case, I lose a house. But they lose the mask." That night, I received a text from an unknown number. "You'll pay for betraying your family. No one will stand with you." I forwarded it to Sarah and turned off my phone. Tomorrow, I'd walk into court. Not as the abandoned daughter, but as the rightful owner. And this time, I had evidence. Courtroom 3 at the Bergen County Courthouse was packed that day. I sat silently beside Sarah, dressed in a plain gray suit, gripping my case folder like it was the only thing holding me upright. Across from me, my mother wore a cream sweater, eyes red, clutching an old Bible like a prop. Chloe looked like she was headed to a wedding, not a courtroom. Floral dress, curled hair, smug posture. My father, Jeff, wore a suit 2 sizes too big, but his glare was just as bitter as every time I dared to defy him. Presiding over the hearing was Judge Harris, a woman in her 60s. Known for her no-nonsense courtroom. No theatrics, no emotional manipulation. The plaintiff's lawyer. My family's representative opened with a painfully dramatic monologue about a daughter poisoned by resentment and 2 elderly parents being financially abused. They claimed I had orchestrated a scheme to steal the house and heartlessly evict my family. I said nothing. I just looked at Sarah. When Judge Harris nodded for our side to respond, Sarah stood. "Your Honor," she began, clear and steady. "We will present a structured rebuttal, supported by verified financial documentation and surveillance video provided by a neutral third-party neighbor, with no familial connection to either side." She opened the file. "These are the expenditures made by my client, Harper Ellen Harris, over the past 3 years. Property taxes, $19,600, 0 cents. Roof replacement, $4,400, 0 cents. Heating system upgrade, $7,800, 0 cents. Average monthly utility costs, $430, 0 cents. Total out-of-pocket expenses, $47,380, 0 cents. The courtroom stirred. Sarah continued. "During this entire period, the defendants paid no rent, signed no lease, made no requests for improvements, and engaged in intentional damage to the property." She handed the USB to the court clerk. The screen lit up. First, footage of my father pounding the garage door, shouting, subtitled "Thanks to Valentina's help." Next, Chloe sneaking out the back door with Grandma's jewelry box. Then, my mother yelling in the front yard as I walked away. Judge Harris cut the video at 30 seconds. "The evidence is clear. Do the defendants have any response?" My mother stood, trembling. We didn't know. Harper never told us she owned the house." Not saying doesn't make it untrue, Judge Harris replied dryly. My father growled, unable to contain himself. I raised that girl, and now she throws us out like garbage? Sarah didn't flinch. You're the one who took out loans that brought collectors to your doorstep. You gambled away her college fund, forcing her to work 3 jobs. And you're the one who declared that house is mine, no matter whose name is on it, in the 3rd surveillance video. Chloe shot up. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to prove she's better. That video was edited. Miss Chloe Harris? The judge's tone turned sharp. The footage was legally obtained and unaltered, and taking property that doesn't belong to you is theft. If you'd like to deny it further, we can escalate this to a criminal case. Chloe slumped back down, pale and shaking. Judge Harris rested her hand on the file stack. This court does not rule on emotion. We rule on evidence. And the evidence shows that Miss Harper Harris bore the full financial burden while the defendants unlawfully occupied, damaged, and defamed the rightful property owner. Silence hung heavy in the room. My ruling, she continued, is that the defendants have 30 days to vacate the property or face legal action as unlawful tenants. Should they wish to remain, rent will be calculated at full market value, plus penalties for damages incurred. My mother burst into tears. My father cursed under his breath. Chloe sat frozen. As for me, I stayed still. Judge Harris looked at me. Miss Harris, if any party continues to harass you, notify the court immediately. This is a legal matter, not a family dispute. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. Outside the courtroom, my mother grabbed my arm. Are you happy now? You won. Is this what you wanted? I gently pulled her hand away. No, Mum. But at least this time, I wasn't lied to. On the 30th afternoon, the final day of the court-ordered deadline, I stood at the far end of Willow Creek, watching a scene I once hoped I'd never have to witness. A rental truck blocked the driveway. 3 movers loading heaps of worn, mismatched belongings into the back. On the lawn sat a ripped armchair, its stuffing peeking through, and next to it, Chloe's denim duffel bag. The one she once bragged about buying on her trip to Cancun. My mother stood in the doorway, tears streaming, still trying to maintain the air of someone wronged by the universe. My father barked orders at the movers, his leather shoes now mud-stained from pacing across the wet grass. I didn't step onto the property. I waited at a distance. At exactly 4:20 p.m. the locksmith I hired arrived. Block 10 dark blue jacket, company logo stitched above the chest. He gave me a quick glance. I nodded. He approached the front door. My mother lunged to block him, her voice cracking. You're changing the locks the moment we walk out? Really, Harper, it's come to this? I stepped forward, calm enough to scare myself. This isn't your home, Mom. It's the property I bought, maintained, and am now forced to protect after years of having my trust abused. I raised you, she screamed. You owe me everything. I met her eyes. You raised me on the condition that I never disappoint you. And the second I stopped obeying, you called me ungrateful. But you're the one who taught me any love that comes with control isn't real love. My father stormed forward, face flushed. You're destroying this family over a house? I let out a dry laugh. Families don't fall apart over property. They fall apart when the people in them demand, trample, and blame without ever owning up to what they've done. Chloe wheeled her suitcase past me, fury in her eyes. You'll regret this. One day you'll be so alone, you'll beg us to forgive you. I looked at my sister, the same one who stole Grandma's jewelry and treated it like a soulless trinket. I've been alone before, Chloe. But I'd rather be alone and free than surrounded by people who see me as nothing but a talking wallet. The locksmith looked at me for the go-ahead. I nodded. The metal click of the old lock coming off echoed like a final sentence. The 3 of them stood there, stunned, angry, and for the first time, powerless. I didn't look back as I stepped through the gate. A week later I received 3 unread messages. One from Mom, one from Dad, and one from an unknown number I was sure was Chloe using a different SIM. The contents were familiar. Tears, guilt, blame, and the final sweet threat that no one will ever love you again. I hit delete all without hesitation. I didn't move back into the house. Even after it was deep cleaned, repainted, recarpeted and deodorized, I had no interest in living inside a space that had witnessed years of being used as an emotional ATM. Instead, I listed the property with a licensed rental agency. Within a week, a young couple from Hoboken signed a long-term lease with full maintenance, accountability, and timely payment guarantees. They thanked me for giving them a fresh start in a quiet neighborhood. As for me, I returned to my little studio on Lafayette Street. 400 square feet. White walls, a tiny kitchen built for one. The window overlooked a neighbor's rooftop, but every tile underfoot, every coat hook by the door. I picked it, I painted it, I installed it. At night, I boiled tea on the stove and played jazz from my beat-up Bluetooth speaker. No one called asking me to cover their refrigerator repair. No one knocked to borrow just a couple hundred, we'll pay you back next week. No one reminded me I wasn't really grown up because I wasn't married yet. I sat in my wooden chair by the window, watched the golden lamplight stretch across the wall, and realized I never needed a house to prove anything. I only needed peace. And for the first time in my life, I had it. No hands grabbing, no voices commanding, no guilt-tripping masks demanding repayment in the name of love. Just me. No debt, no emotional strings, no conditions. And that peace, that silence, was the most valuable thing I'd ever owned. One quiet Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through the window of my little Lafayette Street apartment. As I brewed coffee, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I'd previously blocked and unblocked. This time, it showed a name. Chloe. Sister. Hope you're enjoying yourself after throwing your whole family onto the street. Mom still cries every night, but I guess that doesn't bother you anymore. Looks like money and control are what you always wanted. I read it without feeling anger, nausea, or even resentment. Just silence. Then I pressed and held, tapped, delete conversation, and watched the message vanish without leaving a ripple in me. Not long after came an email from my mother. Subject line, "Can't believe you did this to us." 3 lengthy paragraphs followed, laced with guilt, comparisons, and the familiar refrain, "After all we sacrificed for you." I didn't finish reading it. I knew what would come next. Their pain, their broken hearts, the closing line warning that I'd one day live alone and full of regret. I closed the email, sat down slowly on the sofa by the window. My coffee was still hot. Sunlight glowed across the oak table I'd varnished with my own hands, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not guilt, but clarity. I saw it clearly now. I hadn't broken the family. I had escaped the prison, built on guilt and promises of love. I used to think forgiveness meant silent endurance, that being the bigger person was the only way to stay connected. But love that requires you to lose yourself isn't love at all. For 33 years, I had chosen them. I chose to pay tuition instead of traveling. I chose to repair the roof instead of buying a new laptop. I chose to skip friends' graduations because I was working to pay their property taxes. This time, I chose me. And oddly, no thunder struck. There was only peace. The kind I used to confuse with emptiness, but now recognized as freedom. The next weekend, I welcomed my new tenants, Marcus and Hannah, with their 2-year-old daughter, Ellie. They entered what had once been my battlefield, carrying a pothos plant and a chubby little corgi. Marcus beamed as he looked over the lease. "You're the best landlord we've ever met. Everything's clear, thoughtful, and this house actually feels cared for. I smiled. I once gave this house everything I had. I just hope now it finally gets the love it deserves. Once they finished moving in, I stood at the edge of the yard and looked in. Warm lights glowed through the windows, and laughter from the kitchen echoed down the driveway. Laughter more real and joyful than any Thanksgiving I'd endured there. No more blame. No more family used as a shield for manipulation. The house had been cleansed, and so had I. That evening, back in my apartment, I wrote in my journal. An old habit I'd reclaimed now that I was no longer buried under endless responsibility. I don't need forgiveness. I don't need to be understood. I just need to know that I lived truthfully, loved fully, gave what I could, and now it's time to receive, not from anyone else, but from myself. I looked around. The thrifted painting from a Brooklyn market, the self-assembled bookshelf, the little desk under the window where I once wrote my first resume. The space wasn't grand, but every inch reflected who I truly was. Unfiltered, unbent by expectation. That was something I'd never had before. Another message buzzed. Mom called 10 times. Not answering is cruel, Harper. From an unsaved number. I didn't have to guess who it was. I quietly switched on Do Not Disturb. Then, turned the phone face down. I lit a candle, dimmed the lights, sat in stillness. No explanation needed. No defense necessary. Just breath. Karma, I realized, wasn't some mystical revenge. Karma was simply refusing to let people keep hurting you legally. Karma was closing the door, not in bitterness, but in dignity. And once that door is locked, no one gets to bring the darkness back in. Harper's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes, the only way to protect your peace is by walking away from the people who exploit your loyalty in the name of family. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's clarity after years of emotional debt. In real life, setting boundaries doesn't destroy family. It reveals who never respected it to begin with. True freedom begins the moment you stop asking for permission to feel safe. What would you have done in Harper's place? Would you have chosen peace, too? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, thought-provoking stories about family and life.